To get a better understanding of what assessment involves and what we do to try and develop the best assessments for measuring individual differences, there are a number of concepts that are important to know. The emphasis that you should get from all this is that there are some fundamental and basic assumptions and procedures that are embedded within assessment practices. Knowing these will help you to better understand how we develop assessments, including how we develop ways to assess you in this unit, for example. Although the discussion in this lecture focuses on personality and intelligence as psychological constructs, many of the ideas can also be applied to the kinds of assessments we use to evaluate your learning within this unit. The general notion of assessment is, of course, evaluation. Keep that in mind because inherent in the concept of evaluation is the notion of value. It's rare that an assessment is done simply for descriptive purposes. Otherwise, why would we bother conducting assessments at all? Typically, we conduct assessments because they have some purpose. For example, as feedback for improvement, as in performance assessments or product assessments, to determine whether someone should progress or not, as in educational assessment, to determine suitability, as in vocational or human resource assessments, or to determine what needs to be done, as in a safety assessment. Throughout your degree, for example, in every unit that you're going to be doing, you will be assessed to evaluate what you have learnt, with an expectation that you should have learnt something that your teachers have determined is valuable, and this has an impact on your progression through the degree. So what is psychological assessment? Similarly, psychological assessments are used to evaluate, in this case, their specified procedures used to evaluate abilities, behaviours, and personal qualities. Usually this is through asking people questions and asking them to complete particular tasks. Importantly, we often refer to this process as a measure of individual difference because we're measuring individual differences. And what we're really looking at is variation between individuals and how an individual differs from other people. In personality, this almost seems like common sense, doesn't it? We're all different from each other. So the tools we use are to try and understand how we're different and also how we are similar to each group and the rest of the group, or to each other and the rest of the group. Although there are many different areas of assessment in psychology, such as assessment of skills, learning, achievement, memory, mental health, when we talk about individual differences, we're often talking about two main areas: personality and intelligence. Why might this be, do you think? One reason might be that there's an underlying assumption that the source of the individual differences in personality and intelligence are stable. That is, that there's not a great deal of change over time or across situations. And hopefully you'll notice, as we talk about these areas, that this makes an important difference to how we assess and the kinds of criticisms that have been levelled at assessment practices, especially in the area of intelligence. What we need to be mindful of, therefore, is that the way in which we develop and conduct assessments is obviously going to be influenced by the definitions and theories that we have. If my definition of learning is that it's the same as memory, then the questions I choose for the exam are likely to be all factual recall questions, and I might do things like ask you on what page the definition of psychological assessment is presented. So how many of you have just turned to the page? Unfortunately, or fortunately, that's not the definition that I or others in the psychology school subscribe to. If, on the other hand, my definition of learning in this unit includes your ability to recall information, so memory, to understand it, and also apply it to novel situations, then chances are that some of the questions in the exam might include case studies. For example, giving you a case of a person demonstrating some personal qualities and asking you what personality dimension they're most likely to score high on. Hopefully from this you can see how our definitions and theories, influenced by our context and worldviews, will influence how we measure and assess psychological quality.